Well, good morning. And on behalf of NCGA's Board of Directors and staff, welcome to our NCGA CUTC special online event. I am John Linder, President of NCGA, and my family raises corn, soybeans, and wheat in Central Ohio. Technology touches almost everything we do on the farm on a daily basis, and it is very integral to the success in the pursuit of our mission at NCGA to create and increase opportunities for corn growers. CUTC is not only an important event, but it is also a process in action that has been taking place since 1998. I'm so pleased that you're here and able to participate with us today. Also, as many of you may know, Sandra Wright of NCGA, Sandra has been working on CUTC since day one. What you didn't know is she must have begun her career with NCGA as a teenager, because in a few short days, Sandra will be celebrating her 25th work anniversary. And if you know Sandra, 25 years here, it just doesn't seem possible. CUTC enables us to bring together a broad group of industry and academia to focus on new technologies that will drive future demand for corn. Let's explore together as a panel of industry luminaries, talk about the opportunities for the staple of funding research, development, and commercialization, making connections and giving definition to the pathway to success that began at inspirational concepts, finds destination for itself at commercial facility expansion. That is a win we are looking for. And it's one of my goals as we live through this pandemic to come out of it stronger on the other side. My theme as president is leave no stone unturned. And since you're here today to bring concepts to fruition, I'm guessing that you are in lockstep with me. So before we begin, on behalf of NCGA and those in attendance, please allow me to say thank you to our sponsors who make this event, this opportunity possible. So let's get started. I'll turn this over to our moderator, Nathan Danielson. Nathan Danielson is currently a principal for Biocognito. Biocognito assists firms in the agriculture and industrial biotechnology space to successfully bring new technology to the market. Their clients have included Arzita, National Corn Growers Association, Exopolymer, Zymergen, and others. Mr. Danielson graduated from the University of Colorado with a Bachelor's of Science degree in molecular biology. He earned a Master of Science degree at the University of Colorado for his work on metabolic engineering in ethanol-producing organisms. He has an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis. Nathan lives in Pleasanton, California with his wife and 2 daughters. So let's welcome Nathan, and thank you for filling in. We had an absentee today, so due to illness, so you can address that if you'd like to, Nathan.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, John. First of all, I know it feels like a bait and switch for some of the audience that you didn't get Carla Tiemann. She felt ill today, so we're hoping that for a speedy recovery. We're planning to give you some of your money back, those of you who were expecting just to see her, but not all of it, because we've got such really, really solid panelists. I'm going to start off by just introducing briefly, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have them talk a little bit about what their passion is in this industry, and also sort of give you an idea of perhaps some of the specific programs they have. We're going to run through them. Valerie Reed is with us. She is the acting director for the Department of Energy Bioenergy Technology Office, or BETO. BETO is a major extramural funder in this space. As deputy director, she oversees efforts to improve performance, lower cost, and accelerate market entry of advanced biofuels and bioproducts. So really interesting background for us to have on the call today. She's been doing this for more than 24 years. And so, she's worked through a number of different departments. I will tell you, frankly, it's really good to have her back at BETO. I think that she brings a pragmatism that is really going to be great for the program going forward. She also has been the chief scientist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, so helping to build the bridge between both DOE and USDA. So again, for what we are talking about today, we'd be hard pressed to get a person that has a better overall view of DOE side. Science has always been a big component for her. She also is from a scientific family, so her mother was led the science department at high school, and her dad was a chemical engineer. She has a PhD from Georgetown. So next on our list is Dr. Timothy Connor. He's the acting deputy director for the Institute of Bioenergy, Climate, and Environment for the National Institute of Food Safety and Nutrition, or NIFA. He's got a very interesting background. So he's got a nice combination of both industry and work in government, as well as a very long and distinguished academic career. So he received his Bachelor of Science from the University of Arkansas, a Master's of Science from the University of Kentucky, and a PhD from the University of Minnesota. He was a postdoc research fellow at the University of Georgia before moving to Monsanto in 1999. At Monsanto, he held various leadership positions, ultimately becoming the Vice President of Global Oilseeds and Food Technology, and Monsanto Brazil Director for South American Technology Strategy and Business Development. Dr. Connor joined USDA NIFA in 2017 as the Division Director for Bioenergy. So again, really great to have him online. I think that solid business development and commercial development background. That brings us to our two folks from the private sector. John May, we're thrilled to have, is career investment banker who specializes in all forms of debt. These are taxable, tax-exempt government guarantees, and also project finance. He's a seasoned project finance investment banker who's financed a significant number of projects. So, what's interesting is when you are in this industry and you talk to anyone that's trying to build something, put something new on a plant, build a plant from scratch, build a brownfield situation, they probably know John because he's been doing this for 25 years. John has been working and has pioneered the use of bonds as a form of project finance in the renewables market. Over the past 10 years, he's really become one of the top renewable energy bankers in the country, having developed national practice in renewables finance funding focused on biomass, biofuels, chemicals, and bioproducts. So really, I think John's going to give us a very interesting idea of, what the potentials are for going and finding funding out there as you move your business into later stages. Finally, Eric Mcafee, really happy to have Eric online with us. Has founded 8 public companies, including Ametis. Ametis is a biofuels company both here in California and also has operations in India. He was the founder of Pacific Ethanol, Evolution Petroleum, World Waste, which is now Vertex, and is chairman of Mcafee Capital in Cupertino, which is a venture capital organization that's funded more than 25 companies. He's experienced in all modes of startups, growth financing, renewable energy investments, and what I really like about Eric is Eric will always come up with a clever way to finance things. So we really look forward to understanding or learning a little bit of what Eric knows going forward. So really exciting panel. We look forward to having them share their insights with us today. What I'd like to do first is actually ask the panelists to spend just a couple of minutes talking about their programs and what they think is will be particularly interesting to the audience. And we'll start off with Valerie Reed to walk us through some of the things that DOE is up to. Valerie?
Great. Should I bring up the slide deck then?
Yes.
Okay, let me make sure that I have it. Well, actually, you know what? That may cause me some trouble since my internet is a bit weak. So I'm just going to talk it through. But before we get started, I just want a big quick correction on my bio. I worked for the chief scientist at USDA, not as the chief scientist. Kathy Witecki, she was wonderful, an incredible supporter of bioenergy, and it was a thrill for me to get to spend 2 years working for her. So very quickly, what gets me up at night, what's passion for us at the bioenergy Technologies Office at DOE, is really focusing in on fuels that have no alternative in terms of being able to decarbonize the transportation sector. So as you are very well aware, light duty vehicles, gasoline, corn ethanol provides 10% to the blends, could be as much as 15 and 30%. We hope one day to get there. But there's also electrification, and electrification is coming on strong and provides an alternative for decarbonization in that space. So looking at the biomass resource and what we have available, there are several sectors or modes, if you will, that cannot easily be decarbonized with electrification. And that's because of the need for really energy dense fuels. In fact, aviation requires 30-fold more energy density than the current battery technology today. So we are a long way from being able to electrify aviation sector. Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just let me know as we need to go forward.
Okay, if you could go forward one slide quickly, please. So just to bring my point home here, aviation, marine, rail, long haul trucks all need to find a solution to decarbonize beyond the current strategies of electrification. Pulling those together, we see they're also some of the fastest growing and expected to grow the most across the transportation sector. So if we can develop low carbon fuel technologies to help support this, we can really make a full decarbonization of transportation possible. What will that take? Well, our projections are we'll need about 70 billion gallons of liquid transportation fuels that are very low to zero carbon. So if you could go on to the next slide. All right, so in this slide, we see the different modes of transportation and how biomass might play a role. I need to point out that biomass is a limited resource, especially when we need to take into account responsibility for sustainable management of the land, production of food, feed, fiber, and other things that we currently get from our agriculture and forest sector. The first two columns here really show a distribution of petroleum fuels across the modes of transportation currently, as well as in 2050. That's the third column. The fourth column, or last column here, represents the billion-ton biomass study data of all of the available biomass that can be made available in this country beyond the need for food, feed, fiber, and other uses. You'll notice that cornstarch ethanol is in this list. And totaling all of that, we believe we can produce about 62 billion gallons of biofuels. This comes with the necessary bioproducts for economic support of the biorefinery and has the potential of reducing 450 million metric tons of carbon. When we compare that to the need, we see that we can fully meet the need for aviation, marine, rail, and even have a little bit left over for heavy duty long haul trucks. So dedicating ourselves to these markets in this time frame is critical to the strategy of full decarbonization. We have been working on this for some time and we have several projects in the pipeline, but we believe we can really make a mark if we put all eggs in this basket, so to speak. So next slide, please. As you know, the president has set very aggressive goals for the nation. And in order to meet those goals, we need to be able to track our progress. For years, our research efforts have been working on reducing the cost while maximizing the CO2 benefits of the fuel. You can see that here in this graphic. We are about to embark upon our final verification of $3 a gallon GGE renewable hydrocarbon fuel coming from various pathways of biomass to both sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel. That is our 2022 target, but we're continuing our research and development efforts on into 2030 and beyond with an overall goal of hitting as low as $2 a gallon GGE. Knowing the very low cost of petroleum, this may or may not be cost competitive without subsidies. However, we need to keep striving to bring this technology down as low as it could go. So as it builds out into a commercial industry, it becomes a reliable, demonstratable technology. We are also considering what it's going to take to hit that aggressive goal of fully building out a sustainable aviation biofuels industry. We believe that'll be about 35 billion gallons of SAF that'll be necessary to meet the market demand in 2050. And that's at 100%. We recognize the industry today is only looking at 50% blends, but to get truly low carbon, we're going to need to go to 100%. If in order to do that, we have to work backwards. And you can see in 2040, we're going to need to have at least 20 billion gallons in the market. That's an estimate, of course, but it sets the stage to see if it's even reasonable. Is this physically possible? And as we work back to 2030, which is our nearest term target, we recognize the role of DOE is to enable as many demonstration facilities as possible to look at the whole array of feedstock and technology pathways so that we can enable a build out of an industry that needs to really start today. But we'll need these demonstration technologies in order to convince the financial community and the industry that these technologies are sound. Overall, the long-term impact of being successful here is the production of 60 billion gallons of renewable hydrocarbon fuel, more than enough to meet the 35 billion gallons needed for sustainable aviation fuel. We'll have an additional 40 billion pounds of renewable chemicals out there, stabilizing the market in terms of liquid chemicals that have lower greenhouse gas potential. I mentioned the 450 million tons of reduced carbon, and we believe 1 million direct jobs supporting this industry. Next slide, please. Very quickly, as you know, our program has been developing technologies for a long time, and we believe we know how to get there, technically. We're going to have to demonstrate this, and that's where the real risk comes in. But important to this is this diversity of potential feedstocks and diversity of pathways. Next slide, please. As many of you are probably aware, this year we released a $30 million solicitation. It came out in a larger solicitation that was $60 million in total. $30 million are being dedicated to the TRLs 5, 6, and 7 range on this graphic. For the last 4 years in the previous administration, we focused more or less on TRLs 2 through 4. And the time is right now to bring those technologies through the pre-pilot, pilot, and demonstration scale. The purpose of the FOA is to get started. The intent is to continue this, hopefully for a series of 5 years, with hopefully increasing funds so that we can truly bring those demonstrations to reality by the 2030 timeframe. We're allowing technologies to come in at any scale as long as they can meet the metrics required to qualify for that scale. We also open the door to corn. If you're familiar with our program, that's kind of a new thing. We haven't allowed corn to truly compete for this type of funding in a very long time. But we know it's necessary. We recognize that corn is facing the potential of a decreased market if light-duty vehicles truly go electrified. And by working now today to look at new markets, sustainable aviation fuels can provide a really resilient market that we believe will stand the test of time, and corn fits beautifully into that story. Next slide, please, which might be the last slide. Oh, that was my last slide. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And it sounds like big things are happening there. You know, I think there's been a ton of discussion about SAF, and you know, I believe everyone on the line would agree that SAF is really going to be potentially an interesting area for us to think about. Next, I think, Tim, I have your slides up. Hopefully I can get this. Yeah, there we go. So would you like to talk to your slides here?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, National Corn Growers Association, many historical conversations with them in the past. And I'd like to say that, you know, USDA NIFA we have a role that is very complementary to our DOE colleagues. We have a lot of conversations. We've had joint programs, for example, with the Biological Environmental Research Unit on feedstock genomics in terms of feeding into production to facilitate a lot of the biomass. And we've had some really active and a very popular program with BIRDie, the Biomass Research and Development Initiative with Valerie's unit, BIDO. So things sort of really fit well together with us doing what we do best, and then DOE, for example, doing what they do best. So next slide, please. So I really only have one slide here, and I wanted to just sort of put it in here. It's a busy slide, but it sort of gets to where I'm trying to, the message I'm trying to send about how USDA NIFA is working in this arena. First of all, our mission is to really invest in research, education, and extension. And as part of that mission, that includes everything from, obviously hardcore agriculture with the little a to hardcore agriculture with the big A, which includes forestry and cattle and livestock, all the way through to food and then non-food products, right? And so our emphasis here is really on renewable bioproducts or renewable chemicals, was sort of a way we used to sort of do it, so it included everything. In that same vein, we focus on workforce development as well. So when Valerie's talking about creating a market, filling the needs for these renewable biofuels, then we're also looking at the same time with, is the workforce going to be developed there that can actually suit the resource needs that are necessary to be successful. So with that, I want to turn our focus a little bit into actually more the R&D side. So first thing I'd like to note is that, we sort of look at this holistically. So we take it from the farm to fork, but not really the fork in this case, farm to stuff, whether the stuff is biochemicals, biopolymers, biofuels, et cetera. We sort of look at it the same way as far in that same concept of holistic. We also look at a lot of things as integrated. So we actually fund research projects that often have integration between research, education, and extension, okay? And then the other thing we do is we look at this as transdisciplinary. So we also look at the needs for example, for biofuels and bioproducts that may require social adoption as well. So we do both biological sciences through social sciences. So we really are trying to sort of make sure that we build it and they will come. It's not an issue, but that we're building it and they're coming along as we build it. And so that's sort of the unique angle that the USDA has. It sort of complements what we just heard from Valerie. So we start primarily with, in our case, non-food crops or the non-edible parts of food crops. So corn silva is an excellent example of where we see traction. And it sort of represents the same continuity of developing technologies that whether it works for miscanthus or switchgrass, the idea that it works for stover can be sort of one of those additional ways in which we can meet the biomass targets to be successful. So we started with that, germplasm development a lot of times, as well as harvest, which takes us through really the logistical side, okay, of biomass crops. And then we moved to various other programs, for example, engineering, which I have in red here, which might be a little bit more on the bioprocessing side, beginning to look at what happens to this stuff. What types of added value products do we create? And then once we move through that stage, you should keep in mind that we sort of keep looking at what are other uses for bioproducts and waste products that comes out of processing. And so that's an example of what we do in our foundation for knowledge of plant products. So whether it's high value proteins, that may be bioproducts of a processing operation, or different types of polymers, or even possibly even nutraceuticals that come out of it, anything that adds more value to the back end reduces the pressure of the price of, for example, the high volume, low value fuels. I'm gonna call them low value because mainly we know we have a price target that we need to keep striving to beat. So anything we can do to add value to the crop makes it more commercially efficacious. And then moving on through, you can sort of see, we also have a pretty substantial amount of intellectual horsepower working on SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels, just as Valerie commented on, for the very same reasons. And then when we sort of begin to look at all of these things coming together, and then we begin to ask, wow, we have hundreds, if not thousands of bioproducts from the petroleum market that really have to be replaced, or at least we have to have alternatives that compete with those to make the market successful. We begin to think about some of the things that we're developing in our sustainable bioeconomy and bio-based products area. So what are some of those higher value or multiple use value end products that we need to continually to put the pressure on the petroleum industry that allows the bio-based products to be successful, including biofuels? And then just to wrap it up, going around to the back end, we have a pretty substantial now investment in sustainable agriculture systems. And in that sort of culminates with integrated programs, research, education, extension, transdisciplinary, crossing the whole bounds of biophysical to social sciences, but it also deals with systems. So not just parts of it, not just fundamental science, but what are the components, pulling all those components together from the part of the pathway, those different programs that allow us to look and really evaluate whether the research is coming together in a way that actually will allow us to move from farm to bioproducts. And so SAS is broader than biofuels and bio-based products, but we've funded roughly $40 to $50 million in the last 2 cycles on about 5 different projects that feature bioproducts. One example of those is, you may be aware of the I Prefer, which is basically an opportunity for rotating pennycress for corn and soy, which adds more value to the grower on the back end. Another example is with our Mid-Atlantic Systems Biofuels project, which is basically reclaiming mining land to grow crops like corn on it, to give us, again, more biomass opportunities. And we also have examples of a project that is in Iowa, Sea Change, which is actually taking residues from biomass sources of crop residues, including corn, as well as crops, as well as manure and things like that, and then using that to generate other intermediates, including biogas, et cetera. So that's just some of the things we're doing. It's a holistic sort of approach, and I want to give you just a good overview of that. So with that, I think I have one more slide, which basically is what we hope to achieve someday, is a very blue, happy world where we all work together. Thank you.
Great, and really appreciate that, Tim. Nice overview. Looks like there's lots of programs that folks on the line might be interested in. We're going to have John May talk a little bit about what Hamilton Clark does. I think this should be a good introduction onto the more private side of funding. So John, take it away.
There I am, off mute. Well, first of all, thanks so much to the organization for inviting me, and Nathan, thank you. I'll make some general comments and leave a lot of open field for my good friend Eric Mcafee. I've been an investment banker, a project finance specialist for about 25 years, focusing on bio, starting with first generation ethanol and biodiesel, and then going on to advanced biofuels like cellulosic ethanol, and then biochemicals. Lately, I've been doing a lot, as Valerie suggested, in the sustainable aviation fuels area, representing companies in the US and in the EU and Europe. That's indeed a very, very hot space right now. I would say that the most important thing that I've learned is that we are making progress at commercializing technologies. As Eric knows, in the old days of ethanol and biodiesel, we would have an EPC contractor that would provide a wrap of the technology, meaning a guarantee of its performance. But once we got into advanced biofuels, obviously that became more difficult for them. And what I had a hand in, and I'm proud of, is in the creation of technology risk insurance for bio. I certainly wasn't alone there, but that's certainly been a help because as we expand the types of technologies and the types of feedstock and output products that we're using in these advanced industrial biotech companies, we need to be able to finance the first commercial scale project and the subsequent projects with non-recourse debt as well as equity. And that's a key part because that debt allows for the equity holders, many of whom could be on the line today at their plants, to earn a higher return and have a much less risky pathway to getting to commercialization if they choose to go to an advanced biofuel or a bioproduct or a biochemical. I guess the other thing I'll say in closing is that I spent a long time in the industry, and it really is a global business now. And I would encourage people to follow Eric's lead in the sense that you want to pursue bold technologies with bold solutions, and it really is a global sector now. I have as many clients in, as I do in the US, in Canada, Latin America, and the EU and UK combined now. And I expect that to expand. So I'm happy to be on the call today, and appreciate everybody paying attention. Thanks.
Great, thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And interesting things what you're saying about the cross-border nature of things. Certainly Eric can talk to that, but I wonder if it allows for risk reduction at some point in the future as we lever these investments over larger areas. So Eric, please tell us what you're working on and what you're excited about these days.
Thanks, John. Actually, John May and his son Matt actually have been friends for many, many, many years, and he has worked to revolutionize the debt funding and project financing of advanced technologies. And frankly, in partnership with BITO's efforts, I think we're moving into a new phase of advanced biofuels commercialization. And I think John's efforts, both domestically as well as internationally, are going to show the way for bond investors and as well as equity investors in moving forward with real projects. One of those real projects happens to be a 45 million gallon per year jet and diesel plant that Aemetis is building. We're converting a former 140 acre Army ammunition plant in Central California to convert vegetable oil and animal oil, which is a typical renewable oil solution for any renewable diesel plant worldwide. But we're hydrotreating it with cellulosic hydrogen. So corn stover has a cellulosic component, has sugars as well. But the component that's non-sugar could be converted into hydrogen, just like we're doing here in California, and have demonstrated as a process to make cellulosic hydrogen. Why is that valuable? Well, regular hydrogen, all the stuff everybody's talking about for the new infrastructure of the hydrogen economy, actually comes from petroleum natural gas. So it comes out of the ground as carbon, and then actually extracting the hydrogen requires a lot of energy. So it ends up being about 80% more carbon content than gasoline to have petroleum hydrogen. But if you make it from cellulosic component, let's say corn stover's non-sugar component, you actually end up with probably a carbon negative hydrogen, dramatically reducing your carbon intensity of a fuel. And in California, where we have the world's largest carbon market for fuels called the Low Carbon Fuels Standard, we get paid cash every single day as we deliver lower carbon fuels. So cellulosic hydrogen from the non-sugar component of biomass, that's corn stover, could be wood from forests, wood from orchards, anything that's the non-sugar component, we are actually using to make aviation fuel for airplanes flying in California probably about 24 months from now. And that's a real commercial project. It's $250 million of real cash going into the ground today. You might note that I said non-sugar part of the biomass. Why? Because we have about 30 billion of invested in commercial facilities today that take sugar, feed it to yeast, and make a very valuable molecule called ethanol. And that sugar currently comes from the starch component of corn, but about 55% of the biomass component of what's non-corn, and it's called corn stover in a cornfield, is sugar. And the 6-carbon sugars, known as C6 sugars, are exactly the same kind of sugars you get out of cornstarch, which is 72% of corn kernel. So there is a massive amount of sugar sitting in a cornfield that we just don't have the technology to extract today. So our company received a $3 million grant from the California Energy Commission, partnered with Joint Bioenergy Institute, which is a DOE-funded entity, and we actually extracted those sugars. And the first step in our jet fuel plant is extracting the sugars from the waste biomass that Valerie talked about. This billion tons a year is actually over 500 million tons of sugar sitting in this cellulosic biomass. We currently have over 210 ethanol plants in the US and more in Brazil and India and everywhere else that can actually use that sugar to make ethanol alongside cornstarch. As I was commenting to our panel here before this call, corn fields are cellulosic ethanol fields through the corn stover. They're jet and diesel fields through the non-sugar part of the corn stover. And their byproduct, the waste product, is a corn kernel, which happens to feed animals and happens to make corn ethanol. We're just perceiving the cornfield a little differently by thinking that we're making the corn kernel and the waste product a stover. I would flip that upside down and say what it really is a jet and diesel feedstock, which is a lignin component, and the sugar should be going into corn ethanol plants. And with that view, that could have a major impact on our investments in the 90 million acres we have currently invested in corn production and the approximately 70 million acres we have in soybean production, which similarly has that biomass, which produces soybeans. So we have about 160 million acres of land dedicated to those feedstocks. Separately, we have 1 billion tons a year of waste biomass coming from municipal solid waste and forests. But I think our agricultural segment should be looked at as being a major contributor to future decarbonization of aviation and trucking.
Great, thank you very much. I think the corn kernel idea is an interesting one. I think that, if you ask the plant, it's the goal of getting another next plant. So I think it kind of thinks of it as the key project, as do growers. But I think really what we are in the business of in many cases is fixing carbon. And so, that kind of gets to, hey, everything there that's fixing carbon is good. It's just what's the easiest carbon to get to in the shortest term. So that was great. Thanks everyone for their intros. I think it was really good. And I think it sets us up well for our next question, which is, what opportunities as an industry should we really be focused on? And this was the #1 question that came in through the survey. And I think that, each one of you, what I'd like you to do is kind of look at it through your lens. And Eric, since you went last on this first round, do you mind leading us off on this round? And we'll work our way back up the chain to Valerie.
Well, as the largest ethanol biofuels producer in California, we have a 65 million gallon plant. I can tell you that the #1 thing I'd like to do is not be dependent on corn starch for C6 sugars and C5 sugars. An ethanol plant's a very simple thing. We have yeast, they're very happy because we give them 6-carbon sugars. We happen to be dependent entirely on cornstarch as the economic source of those 6-carbon sugars. Those are our own choice. John F. Kennedy could have said, we want to be independent of cornstarch and make that the 50-year goal of the United States, and we've solved it over the last 50 years. We just elected not to solve that problem. And as a result, this billion-ton study that BETO does every year, talking about all the sugar that we have available, it's in the case of orchard wood, it's 20 years of a tree sitting out there absorbing CO2. Currently, you know what we do with that? We burn it. In California, we burn over 3 billion pounds per year of waste orchard wood. It goes up in the form of air pollution and CO2, but that's 55% C6 and C5 sugars that we have just not applied our research to extraction of those sugars. So I'm running the biggest sugar ethanol plant in California. We just are, because of lack of science, we're dependent on cornstarch-based sugars. And that's just solely our own decision to import crude oil from Saudi Arabia into California instead of importing sugars from waste forest, waste orchard, and waste let's call it corn stover, which shouldn't be a waste product though. So #1 is give me C6 sugars, please. Then give me C5 sugars, please. Make it from a waste source. And gosh, I tell you, I got 210 ethanol plants. I serve on the board of the Renewable Fuels Association. every single one of those plant managers would say, that's the next step, guys. Just give us those sugars and we'll today put them into our ethanol plant, start weaning ourselves off of solely using corn starch as our source of sugar. Second point, really would love to have cellulosic hydrogen. Cellulosic hydrogen. Why? Because we're kind of building a hydrogen economy, whether we want to or not. Elon Musk disagrees with the rest of the folks, but bottom line is hydrogen is an electricity storage mechanism. Okay, got it. And you can turn it back into electricity, which is what a fuel cell does. So if you make hydrogen from petroleum, all you're doing is just sucking carbon out of the ground and then putting it in the sky. I mean, that's what you do when you make hydrogen, is you make CO2 and H2. And you're just taking carbon out of the ground, putting it in the sky to fuel the hydrogen future, unless you use a feedstock that actually absorbs carbon from the atmosphere, which is what plant material does. So the lignin component of corn stover can easily be gasified into synthetic natural gas known as syngas. And then using a pressure swing absorber, you can easily extract the hydrogen. That ends up being either very low carbon or even negative carbon intensity hydrogen. In our case, waste orchard wood is about negative 100 CI. And after converting it into hydrogen, it's negative 80 carbon intensity hydrogen instead of what? Instead of positive 170 carbon intensity hydrogen for petroleum. So the second product we need is negative carbon intensity hydrogen. If we really believe in the hydrogen future, please don't make it 80% more carbon intensive than gasoline. We're going backwards, not forwards. We talk about a hydrogen future, which doesn't include either complete carbon sequestration of the CO2 coming from petroleum-based natural gas, or frankly, just good old biomass-based hydrogen. So number two is cellulosic hydrogen. Number three, and I'm going to end with this one, is that I really do believe in Beto's mission that the billion-ton plus per year waste biomass is the future. I agree completely with that. And what we need to do is take it from a solid in the form of wood, break it down into its individual molecules. But I think there's a lack of confidence, let's say, on what molecules should be made. And I personally believe if you talk to Exxon and other major oil companies, everybody would agree that what LanzaJet is doing, which is LanzaTech's technology, recombining through a catalyst that actually was developed by the Department of Energy in the Pacific Northwest National Lab, into jet fuel, that pathway of ethanol catalyzed to jet fuel has very low technology risk, is very much ready for John May's team of people to grab a hold of those projects and commercialize. We just need the right set of, let's call it alignments of policy. But that pathway of ethanol to jet fuel is here today. And the new markets we're creating for ethanol right now we're using to displace diesel in trucks by electrifying trucks, putting electric drivetrains in trucks, but putting the generator in as an ethanol generator. That's an 85% ethanol generator. That doesn't fly an airplane today, but you can fly an airplane today by taking ethanol, catalyzing it into aviation fuel. And I think that should be a major focus of our efforts, is ethanol to aviation fuel, ethanol into trucking by just electrifying a truck and getting rid of the problem of the lack of torque in a gasoline engine. This molecule exists today. We've produced 17 billion gallons of it in the US. We've just done kind of a lousy job of understanding the commercial aspects of how simple it is to decarbonize trucking by electrifying the drivetrain and putting an ethanol, that old 5.3 liter General Motors engine in the thing that's already E85 compatible today. What we need is a cellulosic ethanol future, as was set out in 2007, the Renewable Fuel Standard. It's supposed to be 16 billion gallons of cellulosic ethanol producing now, today. This is supposed to be our 16 billion gallon year. And the fact that we just haven't applied the science is our fault. It's not that the science is not there. We need to extract the sugar, we need to convert the lignin, and we've got ourselves an ethanol decarbonization of aviation, trucking, and frankly, this is all based on 90 million acres of real estate that's already deployed in corn. So we already have that scale and the billion tons of waste biomass. So I think the feedstock's there. I would just love us to start writing the checks in the right direction so we actually can put fuels in the ground rather than just talking about it for the next 10 years.
I think there's things, obviously, I agree with you on that. The one thing that I would say is that, billions and billions of dollars have been spent on cellulosic conversion and has not been terribly successful. I think where the corn growers sit is they believe that, you know, today we've got a really good feedstock that can get us to these markets, expand these markets, make these markets really viable. And then, you know, as we develop new technologies to convert that feedstock, that'd be fantastic. But I believe that it's reasonable to say that we think that a decoupling of the risk of feedstock from the risk of new product development is reasonable, and that it allows you to get into the market faster, develop a market, and then finally when the feedstock's ready, market, you know, you can go and get that. So
I would simplify all that, really would. We spent $1 billion, DuPont, Poets Project, everybody spent $1 billion. But what they spend $1 billion doing? They're using acid hydrolysis, a little bit of steam and pressure. Every single one of those technologies is exactly the same pilot study. If you were to take this one technology and build 20 pilot plants all using the same technology, and that one technology didn't work, you'd have 20 failed projects. But guys, it's one technology, it's one pathway. Let's just all admit, we just haven't committed to this. We haven't done what Valerie is doing, which is funding multiple pathways to achieve the same end. Very simple end, extract the sugars. We just got $3 million from California Energy Commission, spent the last 3 years, and now we're extracting sugars using ionic liquids. First time in the world, we have a patent on it, granted in January of this year. That's not the only way to extract sugars. It just happens to work, and it happens to be something we're commercializing.
Follow back up on this. I think that I do want to give the other folks a shot. I think that you bring up an interesting point. We should talk about that, but I think, John, maybe give us your thoughts. John, you're muted.
I know exactly why the audience would be frustrated with the history of cellulosic ethanol, because I've been the one that's tried to finance several of those. I also know that Eric's long-term view is absolutely right. We need to keep trying. Let me talk about it from a finance perspective, because it'll give people hope, and I'll be very simple about it. What's changed from when I used to finance ethanol and biodiesel, and even the few times I tried cellulosic, I'm not going to name names, but I tried 2 or 3 of those big projects. What's changed in the financial markets is that the composition of the investors out there has grown. And we have now what's called, by some people, impact funds, or ESG, environmental, social, and governance funds, or some people call them sustainability funds. What are they? They're basically just private equity funds, as Eric knows all too well, that have a mandate from the limited partners that put the money in, that they want their money invested in something that's sustainable. And when you combine that development of that type of investor with the accountability, I'm going to call it, that's been taken on by the strategics in the space, oil companies who've agreed to get to a certain amount of low carbon emissions by a certain date, and then other more traditional private equity financial players like BlackRock and others. I can name smaller firms, but they've also made these kind of accountability pledges public. What it's done is, it's just very obvious. It's leveled the playing field in terms of bargaining power between an Eric Mcafee and me representing an Eric Mcafee on the one hand, and then talking to these investors and saying, look, here's where the biofuels industry is. You can sit there like you used to and say to Eric and me, well, when you have your second project, you know, ready to go because the first one has already de-risked the entire proposition, then send it to us. That was what I used to do for the first 10 years of my career, was have to put up with that. Now, though, because of the importance of sustainable investing, and because these mandates or requirements that this money be invested are real, and because strategics and financial investors are being held accountable to those mandates, as I'm calling them, I find myself in a much better bargaining position to be able to take, let's just say it's an ethanol plant or a biofuels plant, and what we want to do is go like Patrick Gruber did, if I can mention Patrick, you know, and say let's go to a multi-input, multi-output optionality approach that includes but is not limited to sustainable aviation fuel, is doing low octane, you know, whatever other products. And what we can say is, look, to the investors, you need, if you want to play in this market, this bio market, which is the hottest renewable market out there, much hotter than solar and wind, way hotter. It's the big tent right now. So if you're sitting at home or sitting on your farm and you're saying, well, how am I ever going to do this? I'm telling you, what you do is you come up with a conception of what you want to accomplish in taking your plant and your technology forward the way that Eric has. And then you go to the market and you say to the market investors that I've talked about, the ESG impact funds, the strategics, the traditional financials that are accountable, and you say, you need to meet us, meaning the industry, where we are. You can't say, wait till, you know, you've already totally commercialized SAF, for example, or totally commercialized some of the other products that Eric is working on. What you have to say is, look, if you want a ticket to play in this arena, which is the hottest arena in renewables in the world, you need to meet us where we are. Now, what does that mean? It means that you need, as an investor, to provide the pre-project development equity to get from where an Eric Mcafee perhaps sits, you know, before he starts, with an eye toward a project, but he needs equity to spend on front-end engineering and design, all sorts of consulting and advisory type of opinions, and he needs to set his project up. And so the ability to credibly go out and request development equity together with project equity, which then begets project debt on top of it, and it solves the problem of the typical problem of development equity, which is that it's the riskiest form of capital because you don't know if there's going to be capital on the other side of it. What we've learned just in the last 2 or 3 years is if we ask these different types of funds to bridge themselves and provide this development equity and then also be one of the investors in the project equity, that solves the problem because they're bridging their own risk. So there's a lot there to unpack, but what I'm saying is, for those of you at home or on the farm who are saying, you know, this is just way too complicated, it's not that complicated, frankly. It really isn't. If you've got a plant and you want to try to take it to the next level in terms of products and outputs or use different feedstocks, there is money out there, and you know, a boutique firm like Hamilton Clark, where I work, is focused on bio and on the investors, both, or not both, but strategic, financial, and sustainably motivated impact funds that are going to be motivated to talk to you.
Okay. Well, John, thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. So if I took, you know, the takeaway from what I heard is that there are these funds now that have this sustainability goal, and they are coming to you with interest of getting in and being a little bit less risk averse than they've historically been. And so, you know, you guys, you can find John on the web. So if you have questions on this, I think certainly he'd be a good person to speak with. We're going to move on, Tim, to Tim. Thank you very much, John. That was great. Tim, what are you thinking that we should develop as an industry?
Yeah, well, Nathan, I'm listening to the conversation and I'm wondering, honestly, if the best flow isn't to have Valerie in the remaining time we have sort of address it. My flow is more or less where John was at the end with agnostic biomass that feeds into these plants to provide more options and more opportunities, while at the same time recognizing that a lot of the ones we're doing in USDA is developing those rotation crops with corn. For example, pennycress, as I mentioned, which is also going to be a source for biodiesel, for example, and others, but also carinata for jet fuels in the Southeast. So I think what I'd like to do is maybe just leave you that, and I hope that all fits together. But I feel like Valerie actually probably is the key pin here that we want to tap it in the last minute.
Valerie, it looks like you're on the spot.
Yeah, I took a lot of notes. It's very interesting and really encouraging to hear from people with the investment background. Not even sure exactly where to start. Do want to address the fact that yes, DOE has tried many times to scale up technology, starting with cellulosic ethanol. There are a number of factors for failure that I think we have identified through lessons learned and working with the companies. Technologies often look sound at the level with which they're pitched, but as you scale them up, that's when you find out whether or not they can really do what they intend to do. And skipping steps is not an option. And so our new FOA, of course, is not going to allow for the skipping of steps, but a very strong need for each step to be justified before we move on to the next. So let me give you an example. My notes made sense when I wrote them against what you all were talking about, but see what you think here. So to your point, Eric, yes, it sounds like we tried to scale up only the same technology over and over again. But even when you look at that and you go, what worked and what didn't work, there was one factor there that is going to impact anybody who's working with cellulosic feedstocks, and that's the sizing and pre-processing of the feedstocks to be able to feed into the reactor. Whether it's a gasifier or a biochemical reactor, we found that we were not ready. The scale of feed into the reactor was not at the same state of technology readiness. And that can be a very big issue. And so my sense of what we need in order to get over the hump of getting these first of a kind facilities demonstrated is threefold, really. One is, well, fourfold. Let's go with that. You need a very strong technology place where you have checked all the boxes, at least at the appropriate level. It is high risk. So you need high risk tolerance from everyone involved, whether it's the company with the deep pockets who's trying to commercialize it, if it's an entrepreneur, that they have someone backing them up with deep pockets willing to finance it. The financial community and some of the things, John, you talked about are very encouraging that are different now. And you need to have stable policies that encourage getting over the hump, if you will. Nothing is going to happen according to plan. That's the first thing I can tell you and what we've learned. You may double or even triple the amount of time it's going to take you to get that facility in the ground if it's truly new technology. And are your investors, is everybody going to be lined up and ready to support you through the difficult times? And so for the majority of our projects, that was not the case. And going back to the drawing board is what's necessary. This gets to Tim and research and other things. We learn and we go back to the drawing board and we fix, but we need to have the time to do that. So it is a difficult proposition. And our hope is that we learned enough that this time around, we're going to be able to really shepherd this in appropriately, measuring both the time that's needed to get it there. We want to move quickly. We want to accelerate. And so that's my other point, acceleration. The way we're looking at the sustainable aviation fuel story, if we're going to meet those very aggressive timelines and build outs, is look for every opportunity to find the lowest risk version for initial demonstration. So corn can play a role there, and somebody brought it up very articulately. It's commercial. It hasn't got a feed problem. We know how to feed it. We even get to an intermediate with 214 facilities that might be able to have add-on technology, completely reducing the risk of the capital investment, and produce SAF out the back end at the existing facilities. That is clearly an option that we would like to pursue. Okay, let's look at cellulosics. Well, there are ways to get the cellulosic market less risky, and that is higher value products. Developing the higher value product, because now the industry has the deeper pockets and the willingness to wait around to get over the hump, can build that cellulosic front end in ways that fuel isn't going to do on its own. So yes, we provide the grant money to try to do those things, but having all of those pieces come together is really, really important. There was something else I wanted to bring up. Yes, I loved what you had to say, John, about the pre-pilot, what would you call it, pre-project development equity. I really see that as what we're doing with our FOA, but there is a need for cost share, as you're aware. At certain levels, the very pre-pilot level, it's only a 20% cost share. But even then, an entrepreneur needs to have some backing for that. But when you get to the pilot and the demo, it's a 50% cost share. We are phasing our approach to do exactly what you suggest, provide that phase one to as many projects as we can afford to that meet the criteria. And then as funds are available, build them into phase two. So teams will walk away with solid phase one approaches where they've done a lot of site development, talked to engineers, built their designs out. And then it's our hope to have the funds to be able to give them the necessary funds to scale that up. But even if we can't, they'll have a project that might be able to go out and get private equity at that point. So that's a bit of our strategy built into the things that you guys had to say. But it doesn't negate the fact that there are R&D needs. And Eric, something you brought up earlier, the cellulosic hydrogen. I like to call it renewable hydrogen because there's ways to get there without cellulose. And we kind of need every little bit we can to meet the hydrocarbons. So we are pursuing those and have a strong relationship with our hydrogen fuel cell office, looking at various technologies. And even at NREL, we have a electrolysis unit going in to further scale up and develop some green hydrogen technologies there. And clean sugars, I should say cheap sugars. Our current FOA does have a research topic on exactly that. Getting those sugars from cellulose to a cost that's competitive so they can be woven into the existing infrastructure and used. So I'll stop there.
Great. So we have about a little bit under 30 minutes left, and we got some housekeeping things at the end. So I want to throw out some questions and just sort of, I'll let the panelists, we'll do sort of a lightning round. So take these questions as you are finding them, if you think you get something to, that you really want to say. I'm going to start with John on this first one. I'm really curious, VC, we talked about VC, we talked about, equity funds, things like that. What are they looking for today? When people come, when you're going out there with your clients, what is getting the most traction in the marketplace?
Well, I guess I would, go back to Eric's point about the technology. I mean, and I guess expand that by, the whole thing that we have to get over is the idea of one input, a single conversion technology, and one output, which is what Eric and I started with 20 years ago, right? You and I, Nathan, were talking about what's going on in the special purpose acquisition corporation sector, the SPAC sector, and why these SPACs, which are basically just funds, are throwing money at certain types of bio and ag tech companies. And here's a point that I think should be made and isn't necessarily understood. If you see the kinds of companies that are getting bought and taken public through a SPAC as opposed to through an IPO, what you see is they all have basically the same MO or the same approach. What they're doing is they're creating, again, I'm overusing this word today, I'm sorry, optionality. The use, and I'd like Eric's comment on this too, they're using artificial intelligence, computerization, digitalization to custom create feedstock with certain traits that then through a conversion technology can create energy and non-energy output traits, products with certain traits. And that diversification of the risk from one input to one output where we started 25 years ago is where it's at right now. I would say that, and I don't want to offend anybody, I think there's a lot of money being thrown at things without the proper diligence. I'm interested to see what Eric says about this. But I think that the rush is being driven by this feeling that if we bring optionality to the biosector, it's going to create so much more than any other single renewable technology, including solar and wind, has created, and have so much more potential applicability to decarbonization. So I'll stop there and maybe get Eric's thoughts.
Well, John, since you pitched that one, Ginkgo Bioworks in Boston just announced the $17 billion SPAC merger, raised $1.7 billion. It's always interesting to see who's behind the SPAC. The former chairman of the MGM movie studio is the head of the SPAC. So I wouldn't say it takes a whole lot of background in the industry in order to raise $1.7 billion in a SPAC and then certainly not invest it. But this is exactly what John's talking about. You know what this is? This is a $1.7 billion BETO grant program funded by a bunch of SPAC guys. Because all Ginkgo is doing is they're saying, corn stover, that's interesting. If we extract sugar, we can make it into ethanol. We take the remaining lignin and turn it into some chemicals. Let's spend $1.7 billion on hiring MIT and Harvard grads to work at this thing called Ginkgo Bioworks. I happen to know one of the founders pretty well. And that's all they're doing. They're just simply throwing a whole bunch of science at it really fast to use biochemistry and some other gene editing things to try to create oils and sugars. And their investors, of course, think that's worth $17 billion now. It's sort of a pre-revenue opportunity. So as John mentioned early on in his conversation, this is the hot space. This is the big tent. This is where everybody's attention is. I think the government has an opportunity to de-risk the debt. Right now, the USDA, we have a $125 million USDA loan guarantee. That's 80% US government guaranteed. That means 100 million of the 125 would be participated in by the US, well, essentially the taxpayer. But that leaves 25 million for some commercial bank to take as a risk. So let's just think about that. You go to a commercial bank and say, guys, we're going to build this new technology. It's the first of its kind because that's what's required in these programs. Would you please lose 25 million on a venture capital idea because you're a commercial bank and that's your business, right? You can imagine how that flies. It flies like a lead balloon. It doesn't go anywhere. So if we're really serious about these technologies and we really want to do senior debt, which means there's equity underneath it, just do a 100% loan guarantee, guys. Let's get away from this. Just do it. Make the loan. That's what they did to the auto industry to the tune of about 15 billion. So we've done to the tune of about 2 trillion to the entire economy in the last year or two with our stimulus programs. You know what these payments are is they're just guarantees that you do in cash. They're a loan that doesn't have to get repaid. Let's get beyond this whole thing. Just make them 90% or 100% loan guarantees. Makes John's business a whole lot different.
Let me just make one quick point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to shout out to Valerie. I mean, now that my good friend Jigger is head of LPO at DOE, I think he gets it. There's no question about it. He's one of the smartest guys in the world in terms of renewables. And I've got, professional experience with having dealt with him since he started. And he's very enlightened in his thinking about this, and exactly along the lines that, not exactly, but generally along the lines that Eric was suggesting. So I'm interested in Valerie's thoughts on that if she cares to comment. But I think that's another great thing about DOE. I mean, it's fabulous.
Well, let me put Valerie and Tim on the spot. with a question. We've talked a lot about, and I think Eric mentioned that, this Ginkgo, and I make a case of the Zymergen sort of the same way. It's that there's going to be a lot of different products that can be made. I guess, my question is, and these products probably won't be fuel, right? At least in the near term, neither Ginkgo, Zymergen, most of these companies that are out there in the synbio space are not looking at fuels. They're looking at higher value. So I'm curious, Valerie and Tim, how could you support that and get to the biorefinery model where a small amount goes to a higher value product? How do you see DOE and USDA supporting that?
Tim, do you want to go first?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, we support it in multiple ways already. First of all, we have the Small Business Innovation Research Program, which is a great non-dilutive way to get, some ideas moved out there really fast. And then maybe people like John and then Eric get excited about it, right? We have all types of innovations coming from not just the traditional ag innovators, but all over. So that's one good way to do it. I mean, it's not a huge amount of money, but over a 3-year period, it's $800,000 if you're successful. So that sort of whets the appetite, and it sort of begins to pull it through. Hopefully, if they're successful, VCs or others pick them up. We know that the key to us is to keep adding more and more value to these things where we can do it, because that will make the likelihood of the high volume fuels project even more successful. And we also look at this as we have some of them corn projects, but others are timber and Waiuli and, so a whole range of things. But overall, as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges, we are trying to feed in those high value products to reduce the amount of petroleum competition that's there, as well as create new functionality that will, maybe even rise the prices even more.
Thank you.
Let me say real quickly, we're doing a Waiuli project with some guys that you would know, as well as Carinata. I was up in University of Saskatchewan 10 years ago when they were launching Carinata with Agrosoma. These are intercrops. They can fix nitrogen in the soil, reduce the amount of fertilizer required, lower the carbon intensity of corn. The USDA has an opportunity to revolutionize the sources of oils and starches using these new low carbon intensity crops. And I got to tell you, if I was sitting in a position over the USDA to do anything, I say, guys, camelina, carinata, pennycress, a couple other things, lemna, Lemna, that you can grow in vertical farming and very intense things. It doubles the biomass in every 24 hours. Let's just throw $2 billion at that. Let's make that a moonshot, because if our company had 10 billion gallons a year of a low carbon or carbon negative oil, what are we going to do? We're going to turn it into 10 billion gallons of jet fuel. That's what I'm meant to do. So I really think the USDA plays a core role here in actually physically creating the molecules. And separately, BITO, of course, takes existing molecules that are already there in the form of waste wood or something and figures out how to extract it so we can use it. But man, to actually produce these new oils and starches physically in the field at low carbon is a big moonshot opportunity for us. I think it might not be fully identified.
Thanks, Eric, for bringing that up. I keep sometimes forgetting that the audience is interested in ecosystem services and the value, particularly if you're a corn grower and you want to protect your environment and your sustainability. But that it is a system, right? And I think that is critical for us to be successful, is to develop each component of the system to optimize it.
Okay, I'll just take a couple of seconds on this one, I hope. So how can DOE support the type of thing that Ginkgo is talking about now and doing? And many of you may be aware of our own work in synthetic biology. We have two major activities in this space. One is something entitled the Agile Biofoundry, which is located at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, but actually is a consortia of our national labs with expertise in this area. And we have the Advanced Bioenergy Process Development Unit also at Berkeley, and ironically in the same building as the Agile Biofoundry. And the premise of this was built upon the design, build, learn, test model, which is being utilized to really accelerate the time to market from innovation to molecules or organisms or tools that need to be developed in order to scale this up. It has the potential to reduce, I think, the time 20-fold from development of, from the past, from history, where we have seen this work. I think they're around 5 or 6 years old now. We've had these facilities maybe a little bit longer than that. They are fully subscribed. Partners coming in, wanting to use this technology. It is linked to artificial intelligence. It's linked to robotics, moving as quickly as possible from true innovation all the way to a product that then they could potentially scale up in that ABPDU. And that's really a very early phase of scale up. It then would need to go on to the larger demonstrations. So doing something very similar to what's being proposed here. We had a workshop literally last week on how can we expand that model. And it seems that Ginkgo and others are doing this as well on the with the private investment. And it's an excellent way to seed development. And yes, bioproducts do seem to be where the market is headed with that technology. We are looking at how we can ensure that it's supporting our development of staff while at the same time working with the partners who are coming in for the high value products.
Thank you. So, we're getting close to sort of where, the midnight hour. Would like to just get, thoughts from everybody if you had to, kind of sum up a question. I will throw out one thing though, and this is, Valerie, probably more towards you and for Tim. And it gets to, like the facility here in Berkeley, it gets to perhaps the facility in, Peoria, Golden. One of the things that's really interesting and that I look at is I look at this huge number of new products that are going to be coming down the line, but we don't have very good opportunities to scale up. I guess one question I'd ask for you and Eric and John, while they're answering this, maybe think about how you'd sum up what you've heard so far. But Valerie and Tim, how do you think we can make that pipeline better? I think we've got a great R pipeline. I think we've got kind of a bad D part of that pipeline, which leads to a small C.
No, I'm not on mute. Just really quickly, DOE does pride itself on the facilities we have developed for use by partners. You mentioned a number of them. We talked about the Agile Biofoundry, the ABPDU. We also have the integrated biorefinery and the thermochemical biorefinery process development units at NREL. Those are a bit larger, and we're going through a revamping of those right now. They're quite old, and we're looking to what the industry really needs today, and going to be directing our attention to modifying or modernizing the technology there. And we have a feedstock relevant one, getting to that issue I mentioned previously about feeding biomass feedstocks to the reactors. We have a biomass process development unit at Idaho National Lab, which pretty much can do anything you want it to do to a feedstock to find out what's the best path forward for a technology to take that feedstock and make it what we call conversion ready. So these are the tools that we have available, and making sure that industry knows they're there, has access to them. They're welcome to partner with the labs when they come into one of our FOAs. They're welcome to partner with the labs in other ways as well. We have something called a direct funding opportunity. It's called a DFO. We put those out periodically throughout the year to encourage partnering with our national labs, particularly to get into these consortia and into these facilities where they can get the support they need. Thank you.
Tim?
Yeah, and I'd say certainly we have a different model than DOE does, but for us, it would primarily be through partnerships. Eric mentions, for example, Agrosoma was an example for Carinata. In the lumber, the Northwest industry, where we took wood chips and turned it into fuels and flew the airplane from Seattle to Washington, D.C. That's an example, probably more or less, with Alaska Air. We have other partnerships with Goodyear and well, Goodyear is one that comes to mind right now, and Cooper. But I think, and that's with Waiuli, I think overall, we don't see enough of those, particularly when we get into sort of the center part of the country. We see small sort of movements. I think we have to do a better job at when we make awards, that we definitely sort of get more emphasis on, do you have an industry partner that will be able to really sort of help you get there sooner, help you figure out, you don't want to build it and they're not there. You want it to build it in a way in which it is consistent with what they're looking at and what they want. So for us, we probably have to do a better job at forming or encouraging partnerships.
Fantastic, thank you, thank you. And then Eric, I'm curious from just sort of what are your final thoughts and 1 minute or so for all this, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I think we are in a new generation of renewable fuels, and I think that we should all set behind us the failed projects of the past, which frankly had very uncertain public policy, very uncertain government guarantees, 3 to never years DOE loan programs office process. So serious developers really wouldn't even look at the LPO as a source of financing. We're in a new opportunity with new relationships, new people, and we have the benefits of probably 15 years of advanced biofuels R&D and development. The one thing I'd really ask for is better sales and marketing by the USDA and DOE of what I believe are tremendous resources. Our company is commercializing a technology developed by the Joint Bioenergy Institute, funded by the DOE at that facility that Valerie was just talking about. We are actually making a jet diesel fuel plant and extracting sugars as the first step of that process because of that asset. There are not enough sales and marketing people working for these agencies. It's a big word to say sales and marketing, government in the same sentence. But let's all think about ourselves being the same value, part of the same value proposition. You come up with a fancy name like commercial development director or something, but we need to have better communication between these tremendous resources that the DOE has and USDA has, and Agrisoma, who I literally flew my plane up to University of Saskatchewan to meet with a professor who founded the thing 10 years ago, and have never been reached out to by anybody since then. The only reason that I'm even tracking it is because I'm proactively trying to stay involved with it. It should be a problem where every single month I'm getting an email from somebody saying, hey, you're ready for your up-to-date call because we've got these really valuable technologies. You're a commercial guy. You're going to go build plants. We want to be pushing you to go build technologies around here. Instead of being a pulling by me as a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur who's founded 8 public companies, it should be a pushing. I should be saying, guys, I got 25 great ideas. Let's go do 5 of them, rather than I'm trying to find the first great idea by wandering the halls of Lawrence Berkeley. So this is a big ask, I know, but it's something I'd love for you guys to take back to your requisite secretaries, Tom Vilsack, Jennifer. These should be told. Industry wants us to communicate more proactively with them. They want us to staff up with MBAs from Harvard who spend 2 years at DOE promoting the DOE technologies, the DOE loan program office, promoting our strategy. The terrific slideshow that Valerie put on is like a big glaring sign saying, please call us. Well, guys, that's sales and marketing. Let's get a bunch of Harvard MBAs, put them on some, I don't know, internship. Don't even pay them money. Just tell them it's good that they'll become Wall Street investment bankers who used to work at the loan programs office, and have them call me every single month saying, Eric, what can I do to make the LPO better? What can I do to get Beto's technology into your firm? And just make a list of all the guys like me in the world, and girls, lots of females in this business, by the way, who should be funded and supported that are not. And be proactive rather than just kind of say, well, I got great technology. I wonder why nobody's calling me.
Yeah,
I
think ARPA does a nice job. ARPA does a nice job of marketing. I think there's learnings there for probably some of the other agencies as well.
I think all of them have great messages and lots of value to be added. And I think that being more proactive about it for all of us, we need to be proactive in commercial. And frankly, we together can get so much done in a very short period of time. And I like this attitude of communication to be something that's really a focus of people's efforts.
John, I'd like to get your kind of final thoughts. We're getting close on time, Eric. I hate to close it down, but we do need a couple things to get done. So, John.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for letting me participate. I don't have any Any final thoughts other than I think everybody who's participating in this panel has a huge role to play, and really happy to be in the business and in the industry. And I don't want people to feel that they can't raise money, because I'm proof positive that you can start out knowing nothing about this 25 years ago and then get to the point where you've got, you know, on speed dial people that can fund your projects. So I want people to remain optimistic and not sort of feel like the next stage in the evolution of bio, as Valerie and Eric and Tim were saying, is too far out of reach, because it isn't.
Great, thank you. Tim, any final thoughts?
No, I would just remind the national corn growers and the stakeholders that, you know, we have a process in which we take input from our commodity boards. And we really encourage you, if you have concerns or ideas, and particularly if you want to jointly fund specific types of projects that may relate to the end-use products for corn growers, et cetera, we're available. So just contact us and we can work through that.
And thank you. And I will say, you know, every time we've reached out to either the DOE or the USDA, you guys have been really, really helpful and very, you know, I think you're definitely fighting the good fight. And the fact that you and Valerie are participating today, I think, is indicative of that. So thank you very much. So to end up sort of with the way we started, we'll let Valerie give her thoughts, and then we've got a few kind of final comments.
Well, my thoughts are just a huge thank you. This forum was incredibly informative for me, not just to get to share my message, but to really hear from the other speakers and what's going on. I took a lot of notes. I just feel really, really good about where we are today. And I'm hoping that we're going to, you know, take advantage of this really strong momentum and make things happen while we can. And that's going to go a long way for developing this industry.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I want to do one thing just real quick. I'd like to talk about a program that that the Corn Growers puts on. Hopefully everyone can see this slide. This is the Consider Corn Challenge. And so what this allows people to do is to take and suggest their project to a panel of experts at NCGA. And this panel of experts actually will divide up a prize pool of $150,000. So this is truly a prize pool. There's no equities taken. In fact, we encourage you not to even provide any confidential information on this. This is just money to forward your ideas to drive new products for corn. So, you know, it's not a huge amount. It's got a lot of leveraging though, because we get you a lot of information. We've had 9 folks do this in the past, and all of them have been able to continue to raise money and continue to make good progress. So we think it's got some benefits. So please think about that, and you can go to the ncga.com for more information. I know that there were a lot of people that were interested in asking questions. Please send your questions into Sandra Wright. We'll have both the recording of this as well as any information that was provided by the speakers online. And we'll try to answer those questions as well as we can. And we really appreciate everybody's participation. At this point, what I'd like to do is I would like to introduce Randy DeSutter. Randy is the chair of the National Corn Growers Association Research and Productivity Action Team, who were the sponsors of this effort. So, Randy?
Well, thank you, Nathan. Didn't Nathan do a fantastic job filling in as a moderator today on short notice? Really appreciate that, Nathan. I also want to thank the panelists, Valerie, Tim, John, and Eric. I feel better about the future of ethanol and renewables after listening to you guys. I know we need as farmers to think more about aviation and rail and marine and the long-haul trucking industry, especially with the electric vehicles taking away some of our ethanol in cars. So you guys presented some great information. I also want to thank all of you out there that attended and watched this today. We appreciate that. And also the staff that put it together. Sandra Wright's been mentioned. Robin Alscheid, she is the head of our committee, and anybody else at NCGA, Jeremy, and whoever helped put it on, we do appreciate it. We also do have several sponsors, and I know if They had the slide up earlier in the presentation. We appreciate all the sponsors. There they are. And we are going to have the event in person next year. So we invite you all to come back and sponsor again, or if you would like to sponsor, Sandra will be very happy to take your donation. And as I mentioned, it's going to be in person next year. So we'll not only have this great information, but we'll get the chance to socialize and have fun and visit with everybody again, which is kind of long overdue. It's going to be June 6th to the 8th in St. Louis. So stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you next year. And thanks again for a great presentation.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you again to our panelists. And with that, we are going to adjourn.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Sure appreciate it.